I get the strangest wedding presents. This here is my wedding present from a long-time family friend and viewer Simon. Thank you very much for this. And it is a new Home Assistant server, which is a bit of a weird thing to give someone, but he's a bit of a specialist in this field, so thank you very much for that, Simon. Basically, this morning I'm going to be converting from a Raspberry Pi to this here for my main Home Assistant server, and I will be doing so partly because my Raspberry Pi keeps crashing. I think it's doing a little bit too much in one thing, so I'm going to be retiring that to its original purpose, the scripted server for my cameras, and partly because this will mean that I can also convert over to using the full Home Assistant OS in the process, which has a few advantages, not least the fact that you get access to the add-on store, and Home Assistant will then manage add-ons like my Matter server and hopefully my Music Assistant server, and I can run those in separate Proxmox virtual environments so that if one of them crashes, it doesn't take out the whole thing. So let's have a look at what I've been doing. Alright, here we have my old Raspberry Pi on top of my kitchen cabinets, which is a very professional install location, but it's up here because that is in Bluetooth range of all of my SwitchBot devices. They happen to all live in my kitchen. So we'll get this unplugged and switch over to the new Home Assistant server, which is already running Home Assistant OS in a Proxmox virtual environment. As you can see, I've already got a little Bluetooth dongle plugged into the back, and behind the scenes here, I forgot to record it. I literally just took last night's backup from Home Assistant and went to the web interface on the new server once I got it up and running and loaded that backup. And to my absolute shock and surprise, about 80% of my devices were just up and working straight away. So let's get to what wasn't working. Real quick, I've got a couple of integrations to fix, but I'm shocked at how well this has kind of worked. I'm going to have to reset up the Matter server, the Tuya integration, but I've only got two devices on that. And then the one that appears like it might be a bit trickier is the Zigbee integration, because there's 52 devices set up on that, and I don't know if I'm going to need to just make a new entry and repair all of them and make sure they're all named correctly, or whether I'm going to be able to get this one working. I got the Zigbee integration working again. I went into here and I clicked configure, which was an option when it wasn't initializing, and I basically went through the same steps I originally went through in this documentation here to set up my Sonoff Zigbee stick, and then selected continue to use existing configuration, and then just reloaded it again after it did that, and now all of my Zigbee devices are working. So if I can spell, we will see that the lounge sofa light is, for an example, working. So in a quick summary, what did I have to do to get this working over and above loading a backup? I had to get the Bluetooth set up again, which involved just telling it my new Bluetooth dongle instead of the built-in Bluetooth that was on the Pi, and remove that one, and then all the Bluetooth devices just work straight away. I had to go through the Zigbee stick setup process again, which I may or may not have had to do if it weren't for the fact that the Zigbee USB stick wasn't initially exposed to the Home Assistant virtual environment. So once I did that through Proxmox, it may have just worked if I had that straight out the gate. But once I did that, I just went through the configuration steps that I did in the original documentation for the Zigbee stick, and then all of my Zigbee devices just worked. I had to reset up the Tuya integration because it said it needed configuration, came up with a QR code, and when I scanned that in the Tuya app, it said it was already scanned or like authenticated, so I just deleted that from Home Assistant and re-added it up because I only had two AC units that I needed to re-add, so that was simple enough. And then the Matter integration was the biggest pain, sadly, because it's a whole new server instance in Home Assistant OS that I had to add each device to, and then so I deleted each one as I went along from the old setup that had been imported from the backup. And then added the new one with the same entity ID, and then each one just worked as it did before. So yeah, I've got loads of integrations, Shelly, Miros, all the HomeKit stuff worked and continued to work without having to re-add each bridge to my Apple Home, which really impressed me. So yeah, overall I'm super impressed of how slick of a process this was. So if you ever need to do the same, I highly recommend getting onto Home Assistant OS, because everything has been much smoother and slicker since I've done that, and hopefully should be more stable going forward. And if you want to find out why I was in such a hurry to do all of this today, it's because I've got a new product arriving. So make sure to follow me to see that. And remember, home is where the smart is.